This is Writers Not Writing, the show where you can get to know your favorite writers and soon-to-be favorite writers by listening to them confess to the ways they procrastinate. Thanks for procrastinating with us. I'm Benjamin Gorman, and the quiet guy behind the glass there is Doug the producer. I write novels and collections of poetry and stuff. Doug tries his best to make me sound better. And each week we have a secret word to listen for. If you catch it, you earn the right to take an extra break at the time of your choosing from whatever is stressing you out. From Lu-Pai Publishing, welcome to Writers Not Writing.
Today's word of the day is Danny DeVito.
If I take my time.
Welcome, everybody. Today's guest is JB Kish. JB is an author of weird horror, living in Portland, Oregon with his wife. His work has appeared in Cosmic Horror Monthly, Metamorphosis Magazine's Best of 2022, and Unsettling Reads' Still of Winter anthology. His newest short story, Lo-Fi Chocolate Cake, was just accepted for publication for Underland Press's Cozy Cosmic anthology, The Cozy Cosmic. When is that? That one comes out soon, right?
Yeah, October 10th.
I am excited for that one. So Thank you very much for being here. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ben. I really am excited to be on this podcast. I love what you're doing specifically for the local writing community, the people that you have on here. So I am a big fan of your podcast and excited to get to talk to you.
Well, and I know when you're not working on your writing itself, you are also a public speaker. You do presentations for folks about confidence and finding their purpose, we met and you were getting ready to do that, and I always like to tell people when people are speaking well of them behind their back. I didn't get to go to yours because I had one that I was doing at the same time, right? But let me tell you, people were saying they really got a lot out of it, so that was very cool.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was the Willamette Writer Conference. That one specifically was a great presentation, good audience, lots of engagement. So, I mean, anytime you are taking time out of your day to put together something that you think is meaningful, when you get that feedback, it's really, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome. So folks who are watching on YouTube can see we always dress up in costume for the show. So the folks on the podcast, we need to tell them what it is we're wearing. So tell everybody about your costume that you chose to wear today.
Yeah, totally. So today I think we're getting up into the 80s in Portland. It's kind of one of the last hot days of summer before autumn really kicks in. Anytime it gets warm, I go straight to Wet Hot American Summer, the movie, specifically the character Gene. He's the cook in the film. He wears a really wonderful tattered sort of blue V-neck crop top that I made for myself.
It's a bold choice, yeah.
It's bold, but it's breezy on a hot day. Also, jeans, slippers, which really help the feet stay cool as well.
Nice.
Purple bandana over my head. It's a functional outfit. It's breezy, but it works in a lot of different environments. We're talking weddings.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Coffee shop. Yeah,
it would be memorable. Well, I wanted to go with the movie theme too, and I am a rainy, cold weather guy. Totally. And so I was like, oh, it's almost fall. I get to wear my Matrix costume. So I've got the pleather, Trinity bodysuit going on and this trench coat. And it is too hot for this. Like I am just, I'm scuba diving inside this thing right now. But that's okay because I'm preparing emotionally for fall, which is my favorite. Like I like the chilly weather. I'm and it looks awesome if I leap into the air and then float there
right
for a moment before kicking somebody, like that. It's a great look. So I'm hoping that I'm bodying that.
And when I leap into the air, it doesn't look nearly as cool, but that's just because of the amount of midriff, that's going on.
Well, it's just a very different kind of, people are
different kind of vibe.
That's a different vibe that you've got when you're floating.
Right, gut out. But I appreciate it. We're sort of celebrating the whole spectrum of the seasons right now.
That's
so
right.
Between you and I, we've got it covered.
The transition, yes. So this is a show about procrastination. So what has been helping you procrastinate? Get away from the work that you otherwise would be doing. What pop culture things been jumping out at you lately?
Yeah. So the big thing in the news and what's been happening in the video game world is Starfield, big AAA game that just dropped, and I'm a big Bethesda fan, and so I've been playing that kind of nonstop.
How far are you into it so far?
I like to do like a third of the main quest lines to try and get everything that I think you need sort of skill wise to play the game, and then I'll do a hard pause there, and then I'm just deep in exploration mode right now. Are you playing it?
No, my son has been playing it. I have to go. I really want to play it. I love it. I mean, it's beautiful. It looks really cool. And yet I know beginning of the school year, this would be the worst time because I'd be like culling in sick. Like, sorry, I need to play straight. So I'm like, no, I cannot start this till like Christmas break. But my son's been playing it. And the question I always have for him is, but does it have a good story? And he said at the start, it was very like rote, like you would go talk to this person, you didn't have a lot of options in the conversation. And he said now it's really getting good. So I think a couple chapters in.
I think that's totally correct, and I think that I've heard that online as well. And there's a challenge in when it comes to storytelling in video games. Your first obligation out the gate is trying to teach your players how to use this thing you just built, like how to pick something up, how to put it down, how to interact with it. So I have a very sort of, I'm very flexible with games when I first started playing them, because there's this obligation out the gate that you need to start learning how to. So whatever mission they put in front of you is just so you understand what buttons do what. And if you can push on through that, then the game kicks off really, really quickly. But there's so much PlayStation, Xbox controversy happening right now because the game is only on Xbox. So there's a lot of people out there in the PlayStation world that don't like that, and so they've been trying to grasp onto anything they can to sort of downplay how popular the game is.
The system wars manifesting as criticism from people who have not played the game.
It's pretty wild.
I resent that I don't get to play this, so it's bad.
Yeah,
I'm the opposite. Like I resent that I don't get to play. We're an Xbox household, and I resent that I don't get to play the God of War series. It looks very cool, and so I'm like, I want to get to play that. I'm not going to knock it. It is unfortunate that these things are exclusive, but someday maybe, like retirement, I'll retire and go back and play all of the God of War book games. Get a PlayStation just for that purpose. I hear Spider-Man on the PlayStation is really great too.
I've heard that as well. And by the time that we get to retire in our 90s, that we'll be able to play all these things on a cell phone.
Well, it'll be like playing Pong. Like it'll be like, oh, you're very, very retro, old school, playing something on a PS5. Like I got time finally. So
that's been absorbing an enormous amount of my time and focus. And I've been really loving the hell out of it.
Yeah. So what else culture-wise has been getting you?
So I would say the other big areas of focus outside of writing, I have a horror movie club that I care about very much. It's a wonderful group of people. We've been meeting now for over 5 years, monthly. Monthly on Zoom. And it's the number of us have fluctuated, but I think we're sitting at 7 right now. And it's really wonderful. We all get together for a night. We watch mostly bad horror films together.
That's what I was wondering. Is it intentionally bad horror or really good horror, or whatever's the movie, and then you decide as a group?
Yeah, so it's probably 90% of us just razzing each other. So whoever hosts the film night and picks a movie, if it's not good, then that's really on the host. And we've got a place where we document all the films we've watched, and we'll write down who the host was of that one. And if it's not good, you'll know about it in the spreadsheet.
So what are some of the classics that you've gone through with the group?
I mean, we probably always start in the 80s and then expand out from there. So anything from the 80s is usually a pretty fair game. So all of the classic like Halloweens, Pumpkinhead, stuff like that. Some really like weirder ones,
that era.
Yeah, all that. But just this month we watched 13 Ghosts. That was a 2001
I saw that
film.
one.
Yeah. So and that one, that one was pretty mediocre. So
Yeah.
you win some, you lose
I know. I was
some,
trying
but
to
that's
remember. I was
part
like,
of
I know I've seen that. Very
yeah.
little of it sticks in my memory. That says something
Yeah.
about its quality.
For a good reason. Yeah. There's not much to remember, but it was a great time. And that's actually the focus is more just spending time with these people, laughing, and just kind of making fun of bad horror.
Have you ever done Jacob's Ladder?
No, we haven't.
That one is,
And
I mean, that one will be, I mean, it's a real, people are divided on that one. I find it very scary. Like
yeah.
and some people are like, man, this is slow and lame. So that one might be a good one to check out because it'll be some good conversation about Jacob's Ladder. It's
Okay. I'll
it's
add that to my
interesting.
list. My next one for when I host next, I've been really wanting to show the group. It's a Japanese, I believe Japanese horror film. It's called House. Are you familiar with
Oh,
House?
no.
Oh, it's wild. It's really, really wild. It's about a bunch of these, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, it's been a while since I've seen it, but it is just so bizarre. It's about a bunch of these girls in high school in Japan go to this haunted house, and it is just bizarro. Like one of them gets eaten by this piano at one point,
Oh,
but
wow.
it's like strange. The filmmakers, I think, were on some like psychedelics, and really it comes out in the main.
Well,
In
and it
the
was, what is
movie.
the weirdest thing I've ever seen in a manga? Let's make that real, kind of a thing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
totally.
eats a
Yeah,
person. That's awesome.
yeah. Maybe some like Junji Ito
Yeah.
inspiration somewhere. Yeah,
Oh, that sounds great. The house, so it's just called The House.
I think it's just House, and there's also an American horror film called House. So you have to make sure when you're going to look
Yes.
for it that you're getting the correct one.
Well, I will try and find a link and put it in the show notes, and folks can check it out because
Great film.
I'm sure there is somebody sitting, in the audience going, "That sounds like the greatest movie I've ever seen."
Oh yeah, it's wild.
Like,
It is
okay,
wild.
we will take that out.
Cool.
So, what about in the news? What's been pulling you away from your work? That's it all affects the work, right? But what news
Yeah.
stories have been taking your attention away?
Yeah. So I mean, there's big obvious ones, right? Like we all get pulled into the news cycle. So I could cite 1,000 things that I'm sure listeners have already read about what's going on in the world. One thing though that is really special is my mother-in-law. We sort of exchange articles back and forth. She lives on the East Coast. But specifically about stuff like archaeology, that's
cool.
something that she and I really connected early on. So we'll just kind of lob interesting articles. And one recently that I came across that I'm going to be sending her is about some new insights they have on what's the title here? It's Egyptian mummification recipes. So recently, through some wild science that I'm sure is over my head, they were able to find ingredients in some of the mummification processes and tools. They were able to extract some of that from, sarcophagus or maybe from mummy themselves. But these ingredients that they're finding were sourced in different parts of Europe or Southeast Asia. Wow. So kind of expanding our understanding of how far, the Egyptians would take their mummification process. And I've always just been like fascinated by
and how
Egypt.
far the trade routes must have been for all the other groups to bring those things to Egypt.
Right.
That's wild.
Anytime you're interested in this kind of thing, it feels like once you start paying attention, every other day there's some article that comes out that expands our understanding of how early someone settled some cave on some continent that we didn't think people were there for 10,000 years. So I love stuff like that.
Yeah. I got to go to Egypt. How many years ago was that? And it was an amazing experience. And you're right, the Egyptology is like a live and well science. Like there are lots of people who are still discovering tons of things, some of which is physically, literally, geographically discovering, hey, here's a new thing that is buried in the sand that we were unaware of. And then some of it is this wild science. But it's interesting. Egypt is a fascinating place. If you ever have you ever been able to go?
No, it's somewhere my mother's always wanted to go, and I'd love to take her one day. And then just in general, I'm sure I've got an overly romanticized sort of postcard picture in my head of that, like what it's like to go to Egypt. I'm sure it's very different once you get there. But
but that is one of the cool things about it. So that will persist. Like you will have that and this other because they're really layered on top of each other in this really interesting way. So the first thing I would say to folks is, if you've wanted to go to Egypt, go. There's this like misconception that it's unsafe because, the political situation is not great, whatever. Well, they're desperate for tourist dollars.
Sure.
So go and you will be treated very well. Now,
Yeah.
one of the downsides of that desperation is like, it's this kind of tragedy of the commons. If everyone would say, I am willing to be unsuccessful in my business, then everyone would treat tourists a little better. But because of that desperation, people will literally grab you by the arm and pull you into their store. And so you have to learn to be more assertive and say, like, no, I am not going I'm not getting into your cab. Or somebody's like, hey, horse-drawn carriage. And you're like, I'm being, Midwest nice. And, well, but the layers are really wild because here's this country that is, not been managed well by its government, treated horribly by, colonial powers, disempowered. And so for the last, 100 years of history that you're seeing, well, maybe not that far, but back to like the 70s, 60s, has really stagnated and struggled. And so you see this kind of surface level of, poverty and mismanagement that manifests in these really interesting ways. Like they have, there's nobody enforcing building codes. So there are literally buildings that are falling down, like, and yet you're looking the other way. And there's a building that, this same group of people built 4,000 years ago that is still standing, right.
Right.
So, and then I don't know if you've ever seen this, but the Great Pyramids, the city of Cairo comes right up to them. So you're standing there seeing it, and you've seen the postcards, and the desert is behind it. It's beautiful. And you turn around and there's KFC and Pizza Hut across the street.
Right. So imagine totally the pharaohs.
Yeah.
Imagine if pharaohs today could see the Pizza Hut. I'm aware of that only because I've looked at satellite imagery of like, I was interested in like, okay, where is this pyramid that I'm reading about right now? And so I've looked it up, and then I remember seeing for the first time, maybe just a couple of years ago, like, whoa, the city is right up to the edge,
right up to it, and then just stops, and then it's the desert.
Yeah. Right.
So, and that's the whole country is right along the Nile. Like, why would you live in the sand, the dunes that go on beyond that?
Right.
And so it's this rich, thriving, and the people are really warm and wonderful. You're on the Nile, and people are coming up to you in their boats and trying to sell you stuff. Like it's this very active waterway, and people are really kind. It was a wonderful trip in that way, but it feels very strange to see like half of that apartment building fell down and the other half still has people in it. And there's a temple that has been here, So it's a cool experience. I highly recommend.
I think it's that age that sort of history that really interests me because we grew up and we live now on the West Coast, right? And the country sort of visually gets younger the further west you travel. So I grew up in Tucson, Arizona, where it's got its own type of history, but by and large, it's all very new structures out there, right? Save for some of the ones that like the Native Americans have erected out there and stuff like that. But you go to like Boston or somewhere on the East Coast, you start seeing some of this age and this culture. So I think that's what draws me is I like old stuff.
Direction is traveling through time. I love that.
Right.
You're going, oh, okay, now I'm on the East Coast, and I remember going to the East Coast and going, oh, this is a building that has been here for 200 years, and then somebody in England is going 200 years. And then somebody in Egypt is going, oh, wait, this building in England is only 1,000 years old. Are you kidding me? So the further you travel, it feels like you are traveling back in time, which I love that.
And then meanwhile, we're stoked on the new strip mall that gets built out past
that pops up in 15 minutes and you're like, how did that even happen? Yeah.
But it's got a Jamba Juice, so you're excited.
yes. Bet you they didn't have this in ancient Egypt. I got Jamba Juice.
Just
so what's a hobby that has been that you've been getting engaged in when you're not working on your writing?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. And I can almost hear my wife laughing from the other room as you ask this. I'm a hobbyist. I love hobbies. And I have
collect hobbies. Are you one of the people where hobbies. The hobby is collecting hobbies?
The hobby is collecting hobbies, but to take it down one more layer, I specifically, there's probably no way to make this sound not creepy, but I like to collect the communities around the hobbies. I like to collect the people. What I mean by that, to not sound spooky, I just love learning about an interesting thing, that sort of sparks my sort of joy and imagination. And then I say to myself, like, who are the people that are obsessed with this thing? Because I bet they are fascinating to talk to. So I have gone deep in the Viewmaster, the old school, what a lot of people know as like the Fisher Price toy. But prior to that, it goes back, all the way to World War II and even earlier than that. So, for example, like I collect all of the pre-Fisher Price reels, where they were for a while trying to replace like the postcard industry. So everywhere you go, you go to the Grand Canyon, or you go out to the Dalles or something like that, there would be at your local gas station reels you could buy. They were trying to replace postcards.
And these were for adults. This was designed
for adults.
Remember your trip, use your master.
In fact, there was even the military, they commissioned having a bunch of reels made for our soldiers during World War II to spot enemy sort of combatant aircraft. So you can literally click through these reels and try and see what an airplane is, and be able to sort of identify it. So,
which is smart.
I think it's hysterical thinking about all these soldiers sitting, somewhere, just clicking through these, and then we move on and it becomes Toy Story for kids, right? So I met a lot of wonderful people in the Viewmaster community, some folks over in Europe. I created a huge collection. I donated it to the Oregon Historical Society. It was the biggest donation. So I've got this great little collection there of different viewers and stuff. Really wonderful community there. Other communities that I've like gone deep on: metal detecting, model trains, bad horror movies, obviously, zines. I got into the zine community here in Portland for a short while.
Now, when you say zine community, is that folks producing them now, or is that more historical, like going back and trying to find back issues from the 90s and
today's zine community? Sort of, they have annual meetups, groups, monthly you can go meet, and people who are just that sort of guerrilla style zine, political issues, comedy, cartoon. So that's a really fun community. But I think the best was most recently I got to meet the community behind Portland's sort of model hobbyist trains. My wife has her mother's childhood train set. So this is kind of an older school electrical set, not kind of today's plug and play. This one has that giant like dial you crank up and the train starts speeding around. And it was not working. And as a gift to my wife, I wanted to try and get this thing up and running again for last Christmas. And I found a model train store here in town, and I went in there, and it was like a cheetah approaching a bunch of zebras at the watering hole. I walked in, and you could tell it. All these men looked at me, and they were trying to assess who is this guy and what's his deal. And I think I probably walked in with like a band t-shirt like I'm wearing now, and I was probably pretty aloof, and I think I could just tell they didn't want to be messed with. Right. This is our passion. This is don't come in here and screw around. So I very politely explained what I was doing there, and I had watched a couple of YouTube videos, so I picked up a couple of the sort of jargon. I started dropping that, and you could see their defenses lower. And then the next thing you know, they're talking to you. I'm meeting people, and it was a hysterical afternoon spent with a bunch of adult men who are just obsessed with these trains. And it was very informative. I appreciated my time with them. And that's what I love. So,
well, and I wonder if what you're collecting there is that energy, that obsessive, like, we love this thing, and it's fun to be around people like that who have, I go to Rose City Comic-Con every year, and that passion people have for like niche, like here's something that's not Marvel or DC. It's, this like indie press, and I dress up in the costume, and it's like, this person is somebody, this is my people, like somebody who loves this thing that nobody else has ever heard of, but they love it, with this passion that's just wonderful.
That you're spot on. There's something about seeing people or an individual just thrive in their element that if you are willing to just kind of soak it in, it brings a lot of joy. You don't need to be into the thing they're into, but if you can just sit down with somebody and ask what they go deep on. If I were to take you to a bar and if I were to buy you a beer, what could you talk for hours about?
Yep.
There's
I mean,
something
that's
about
why I love
seeing
Atlanta writers
people.
so much. Like writers groups are, I can sit down with somebody who writes something that's totally outside of my wheelhouse. They write romance, and not just romance, but romance that's like way outside of anything that would
Yeah.
enter into my books,
Yeah.
that write, some very obscure erotica, or they write like historical fiction in this very niche historical period, or memoir or whatever that is, about their experience in the 1950s or whatever. And it doesn't matter because it's like the
Yeah.
passion they bring to the writing. I'm like, oh yeah, we're going to talk all night. Like,
Yeah, totally. So then let me flip it around. I'd love to know what's your kind of favorite niche hobby that you've got.
Yeah, my thing is definitely writing. I've been working. I've never written a craft book before. I've never been interested in that. And this year I finally was like, okay, I have been teaching a creative writing class, a couple
Yeah,
classes a week for, more than a decade now. I've got all this stuff. I should be putting this down. And I
totally.
could talk about writing forever. Like, and that's been one of the kind of motivations to even do this show is how do we make a show that is for readers rather than writers? Because, we can get together in our own little writing world and get so
Yeah.
into the weeds, which is fun. But then readers are like, this is not targeted at me, And so I'm like, no, this is a
Yeah.
show to help readers get to know us, not a craft show, but I love that stuff. Like I went and
Yeah.
saw Eric Witchy. If you got to see any of his at Willamette Writers, I know as presenters, we don't get to, get
Right.
into one another's rooms a lot, but he's somebody where he's just masterful and
Yes.
he's getting into the weeds. Like it's,
Yes.
here's this systematized way to control your time often, when that's one of the things he really focuses on when you're writing. And you
Yep.
come out of there just going like, I'm with my people. Like people were totally into how do you, like down to the minute, 45 minutes, and you're
Yeah.
focused. I mean, he's really, yeah, he's great. So I want to
He's
get him on the show at some point.
Oh yeah, he's somebody I would love to meet more. I got to meet him briefly in passing at the conference. We shook hands really quickly as we kind of. I took his place at an event, and he get to take off, and I just got to shake his hand really briefly in passing. But would love to sit down and talk with him more.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, I mean, you would end up going, where did the time go? It's 2 a.m. Like they're
Yeah.
closing this bar down. Like he's that kind of guy. And
Yeah.
he's got all these wonderful stories too. He's a great natural storyteller as well.
Yes.
But as far as his, devotion to the craft, like he's the guy that I would go, what do you think of this? And then he would go, well, here are 10 different, great authors' thoughts on that subject. Like he's done his
Right.
research. So yeah, he's, I'm going, well, this is my perception of this. This is my opinion, and he's like, oh yeah, but I can tell you my opinion as well. And also 10 other experts, because he has
Right.
researched that stuff. Whereas I find a lot of craft books intensely boring. And so part of my motivation to write is like, how can I make one that is fun for high school students and, the folks who are just getting into that world, and it's not, oh, this is being sold because it's Michener, and it's
Yeah.
writers who are very, very serious about their craft. Like, how can this be an intro to creative writing kind of book? Yeah, I think it'll be fun.
Is that out yet? When does that come
Oh,
out?
no, I'm working on it currently. So
Cool.
and it's been fun in class to say to the students, this is this project that I'm going to take on this year. I want your help, and so the
Yeah.
students have been engaging with that, which is fun. They're oh, you should include that, and so
Oh, you're getting like real time feedback
yeah,
on stuff.
absolutely. So I've got
That's
this
brilliant.
mechanism of how to provide this to students in a interesting way that hopefully some high school teacher out there will go, oh well, I never felt comfortable teaching a creative writing class, but if I've got this text, great. So it's very much a mechanism to get young people engaged and thinking about writing in a way that is fun, rather than here's a famous author you've never heard of, they said something about writing that is so in the weeds and uses vocabulary you don't understand.
Right.
That's not helpful. So yeah, I
Right.
hope it can be accessible and a kick in the pants. That's kind of the goal.
Cool. I look forward to reading that.
Yeah, well, but we'll see. So one of the things when I am trying to help readers get to know authors, a mechanism to do so is to think about as a metaphor. If you yourself were a character in Dungeons and Dragons, what would be your race and class?
Yeah. Love that question. So I have played a little bit of Dungeons and Dragons, not a lot. I ran through one campaign with some friends, and we did it for about a year. And in that time, I was able to really flesh out this character. His name is Mormar. He is a fighter dwarf, and I describe him basically as, if you're familiar with It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, he's kind of that Danny DeVito, but sort of in Dungeons and Dragons. So he's a bit chaotic and mostly there for laughs.
Now, how close is Mormar to you? Like, how are you similar and different from Mormar?
Yeah, so Mormar is really interesting because he taught me a lot about myself. We're similar in that I am basically just a grown child who's always looking for an opportunity to make people laugh. I struggle to take most things seriously, which is a double-edged sword at times. And I learned about something playing Dungeons and Dragons called, I think it's called like main character syndrome or complex or something.
Oh, I've
like
heard
that,
this. Yes.
where somebody at the table really thinks the story is all about them. Mormar may have helped me learn that at times I have a little bit of that main character syndrome, and that I need to be better at spotting those moments where I can reel back, let other people shine. And so that was a really great journey for me, because I definitely started with Mormar wanting to do all the cool things, get all the best weapons, help craft the best story. And I started to realize over time, luckily nobody had to take me aside. I kind of started to spot it in myself that I was robbing other people of their opportunity to shine. So
and it's one of the good things about the structure of the game. If you are like, I am withholding so that I can win this particular battle in the most dramatic way at the climax, the team is going to do worse than if you go, I'm going to do my absolute best on this turn, and hopefully you'll defeat the enemy next turn, you know? And so, it's, that learning it's a valuable thing to learn about oneself through a fun
game.
Like,
Absolutely. I think more people should play Dungeons and Dragons just to gain self-awareness.
Yeah, as therapy.
Right, as therapy.
Yeah, that's not bad at all. Okay, so you are attacked by 3 goblins in the woods. You're walking, down through the woods by yourself. These are level 1 goblins. What do you do?
Yeah. So early on, Mormar would try to do the most ridiculous thing possible. But at the same time, I suppose in my defense, it was my first time playing Dungeons and Dragons, so I was trying to flex the system, trying to understand my own boundaries. So any way I could get some kind of competitive edge, like if I could hide somewhere ridiculous or climb up into some tree or do some crazy maneuver, I would try to do that, something way over the top. And then it would quickly come crashing down when the dungeon master would say, okay, that's absurd. You now have to roll this, and this. And that's where I check my sheet and go, oh, I'm terrible at those. And he's like, yeah, maybe you should try something a little more straightforward. So I did eventually gain a falcon companion. And the falcon I would send in usually just to start taking care of like the early pickings, and then I'd follow up with my team. So I think that's what I do here. Send the falcon in, and then the whole team collectively.
You've learned to build community rather than take it on your own. That's good. Yes, that's
absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, well, we're going to go to our ad break, and when we come back, I'm going to ask you about what you've been daydreaming about. Today's episode is brought to you by the all-new merch store at notapaipublishing.com. Of course, the site has books and more books, but we also have merch like t-shirts and hats and art prints. My apologies to YouTube viewers, but podcast listeners, imagine a far more handsome t-shirt model telling you, I just got this new shirt, which shows a ghost saying, "Boo" is Latin for I shout. Seriously, look it up. You're welcome. We have hats with the logo from Unrelenting by Jesse Hennard and Marie Parks, the logo from Our Stories Within anthology, and stickers that show Justice Sotomayor saying, "Respectfully I dissent," with the respectfully crossed out because she chose to omit that in her response to the court's recent homophobic ruling. And there are art prints by Michaela Thorne, the artist and author of Tooth and Claw. Check out all the great merch at the store and use the code SHOWFAN for 10% off your entire order. All that's in the show notes. Also, we're always on the lookout for great guests and advertisers. So if you have a book or other product to sell and you're looking for a group of the most intelligent, witty, discerning readers, let us help you make that connection. Our ad rates are as low as $15, and guests will never pay to be on the show. Right, Doug? We agreed on that? We only have guests we want to talk to. Some jerk offers us $1 billion to be on the show. No way. Take a hike. Keep your billion, Elon. Stuff it in a pillow and hug it and cry because you're not cool enough to be on this show. Them's the breaks. You too, J.K. Rowling, get your hateful, racist, transphobic ass out of here. You can't buy an empathetic soul with that $1 billion, and it won't get you on this show either. The rest of you, make Writers Not Writing a part of your marketing plan today. Welcome back, everybody. So, JB, what have you been daydreaming about lately?
Yeah, so I want to talk about this in like the least depressing way because it can be a very positive thing. But I daydream, or rather, spend a lot of my free time just thinking about chronic illness. I have Crohn's disease, and that's a big aspect of my life that influences a lot of decisions that I've made to date and will continue to make for the rest of my life. So I spend a lot of time specifically thinking about other artists with chronic illness and how they sort of navigate their lives with that. So Elle Mitchell, who you had recently on your podcast, I think a few episodes ago, who's amazing. She and I met recently and really strongly connected over this specific topic because, you know, as she spoke about on your podcast, is somebody who struggles with her own chronic illness. And it was the first time I think I had met somebody who I'd seen explore that through her writing, which is exactly something I've done in all of my works. Not all of them, but a good majority of my works have something to do with kind of like the inner process of how our bodies work, and is a reflection of my journey with Crohn's disease. So I think a lot about that. I think about just how people are coping. I think about how challenging it is for people to go day to day with an invisible illness that could just be really detrimental physically and mentally.
I wanted to ask about that because Crohn's disease absolutely is one of those invisible illnesses. Like if you didn't tell somebody, they're not going to know. What is something that affects you day to day that people who don't know anything about Crohn's disease don't know, and that you wish people understood about the way this affects you on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah. So Crohn's is interesting and affects, like any illness, affects people very differently. One of the there's so many great answers to the question you just asked. I think there's a huge psychological aspect to Crohn's disease that people are unaware of. You know, IBD and Crohn's and colitis are what we kind of describe as like an embarrassing disease, right? A lot of the symptoms of this are manifesting in the bathroom, right? So you go to the bathroom and you're having symptoms of diarrhea or, you know, blood in your stool. And when you're a young person and you experience that, it's mortifying. It's terrifying, right? Like, it's really scary. And then your journey to diagnosing that and trying to figure it out can be really challenging if you're not finding the right healthcare providers. So psychologically, there's a huge mental game to this. And because it is an uncomfortable topic to talk about, people don't. So I spent a couple years back pre-pandemic volunteering at something called Camp Oasis. So Camp Oasis, it's put on by the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation. They do camps all around the country, and there's one up in Washington. I just got connected with through some volunteer work, and they asked if I wanted to be a volunteer camp counselor for a week at this camp, which was a really exciting opportunity for me because I didn't really ever go to like a traditional camp as a kid. So I said, sure, I'll give it a shot, and met some great adults, friends there who also have IBD, Crohn's, and colitis. And the wonderful thing about this camp is it's a week of people spending time with each other. So you take a bunch of kids specifically who are struggling with a disease that's very embarrassing to talk about and physically just withers you away. Another answer to your question is sometimes when you're in the middle of a flare, it can be really challenging to keep nutrients in your body, right? So you're just kind of eating or struggling to eat, but no matter what you're doing, you're getting skinnier and you're getting skinnier. And that's another really scary symptom. Sometimes it's so bad they have to take out parts of your colon. You have an ostomy, it gets replaced with a bag. So you've got all these kids coming together who've struggled individually, and some of them for the first time are being around their peers in the community.
Yeah.
And I ended up doing this volunteer work for I think maybe four summers, because it was such a wonderful experience to see. What I really loved were not the kids who had been coming reoccurring, right? They got it, they understood it. What I loved were the first time campers who showed up. You could see how scared they were to go to camp. That's scary for a kid in general. But then if you have IBD, and the cool thing is at these camps, they put a huge amount of effort into increasing like the access to bathrooms. So they're bringing porta potties all over so it's hilarious because you've got this traditional camp structure and then suddenly there's like porta potties everywhere.
Yeah. But it's practical.
But it's practical. And you see these kids, the first 24 hours, very hesitant. They don't quite get it. And then, by the second day, you've got people like showing off their ostomies. And just like nobody's weird because everybody's weird. Yeah. And that is such it is I struggle to communicate emotionally the impact of that, because when you talk about it, it sort of lowers the stigma. And that gets you out of that mental state that I talked about when I first started answering your question of the sort of psychological game can be really detrimental, especially to young people. I was blessed in that I got to go 18 years of my life before my symptoms started showing. We got kids who are showing up who are diagnosed, 4 or 5, kids are getting diagnosed as infants now. It's on the rise. So yeah, that's a really wonderful experience that I got to have going to that camp. And
do you find that folks, like, I can just imagine at the camp that there becomes kind of a inside outside speech, like where people are saying, this is how we are communicating about our needs here. And also, let me give you some tips about how to talk to the folks outside of this camp about, I've learned this phrase that's really been helpful to me. I got a Crohn's disease break. I got to go, and so people are learning that, inside or outside of baseball.
It's totally that. And then you've got these kids, after they spend a week together, they go back to their small town in California or Oregon, where they don't know anybody with that disease, but they are riding that energy. They've now got that confidence. You see them come back a year later. They're stoked to be back, see their friends. All their friends are communicating now because social media is like anybody can communicate. And then I, just being there as an adult, got to meet other adult counselors and now have my own chat group growing with, because I didn't actually have a very large Crohn's community myself, because again, people don't want to talk about this, but now I've got a great chat thread with some dear friends. And anytime one of us is up for a colonoscopy or having a bad flare or getting to try some new exciting drug that just got approved, we're chatting about it. And that is 50% of the game right there, is keeping a positive mindset. And you got to have community to do that, like anything else.
Well, I was going to say, what are some tips and tricks, but maybe that's it. I mean, maybe a lot of it is just the positivity, but are there any other kind of tips and tricks that you heard people sharing where you were like, that is cool, I wish more people knew about that?
Yeah. I always come back to just that idea of communication. Really, anytime I meet somebody new, occasionally somebody who knows that I have it and I'm very open about speaking about it will send somebody who's just been diagnosed my way. And the first thing I tell them is get out there and find your community, because the second you can start talking about it openly and not in that sort of hushed voice, I'm embarrassed to talk about this thing that just happened, it's liberating, it's freeing. And psychologically, stress, it's, it impacts the body. There's plenty of evidence to show that stress has a negative effect on you. So when you're going through, this flare or whatever it is you're going through with your own chronic illness, you got to remove as much of that stress element as you can, because it's just unnecessary baggage on top of a problem that you're already trying to solve for.
Well, yeah, I think about, it's similar to other conditions that are psychological, or folks who are neurotypical. Like the diagnosis and community are part of the treatment. Discovering, oh, this is a symptom of my ADHD or my autism or whatever is so helpful to go. And now I don't have to mask in quite the same way because I'm not stressed about that, because I understand where it comes from and I've connected with others who deal with it in a different way or whatever. And so, I bet that's Absolutely. A lot of it is finding your people.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And making jokes as soon as you, I mean, because it's like if you can laugh at yourself, then that's another great way for helping people laugh with you and bringing some of that levity to life, because we need more levity in our lives, just across the board.
Yes, agreed. So that's awesome, and I am excited to kind of get that out into the world and get people thinking about that. The people, there's this wonderful piece that I highly recommend. I know that the author himself has become canceled's not the term, he passed away, but David Foster Wallace has some issues that have come to light, but he's got this wonderful speech that he gave at I'm trying to remember what, Vassar or some university, at their graduation, that's about how education isn't about necessarily making money or whatever. It's about changing our ability to think about things so that in the moment we have the freedom to say, I could choose to think about this differently. And I think, when it comes to something like, any kind of chronic illness, the more all of us can learn, then the more we can say, oh, I could choose to imagine, I could choose to perceive that maybe this person is struggling for a reason other than the reason that was my first impulse. This person seems irritable. Maybe this person is really struggling today. Now I understand why. And I will treat people differently because I have gained the ability. And so, I don't need to even know that a person has Crohn's. Like a person is struggling today. And the more I can learn about the various kinds of struggles people face, the less I'm willing to go snap judgment. Why is that person taking a 15-minute break? Maybe they need to take that 15-minute break, and I shouldn't presume that it's I should have different ways that I could imagine it might be, rather than leaping to the most cynical. I'll post a link to the speech, because it is the kind of thing that I encourage you, watch it, and then you'll find yourself saying, oh yeah, this is water, which is this phrase he keeps coming back to. It's really wonderful. So I'll post a link. My fiance and I was showing it to her, and we both, even since then, have had moments where we're like, I was irritated with this person, and then I realized maybe there's this thing I don't know.
I love that. I'll read that. And I imagine that must show up for you so often in teaching, because you're speaking to this audience that is shifting every 60 to 90 minutes, and you're bringing in all these new faces on a regular basis, and each year you have to make those quick surface level judgments about people's personalities, but to not further judge them when you start to see more of them show up in different ways must be an interesting challenge as much as it is an opportunity for you.
But I think you're right. It's the opportunity part. I think the further I get in my career, the more I have benefited from saying, what this student is dealing with is not me. This is not about me. This student is struggling with this other thing. One of the things I struggled with early in my career was why is this student not putting forth effort in this way? Well, I was saying in this way I would. So it was very self-centered.
Right. There it is.
It was, I am putting the onus on the student. The student is, and later in your career, you start to realize often the student is resistant because of a reason other than, I don't like you, I don't like this content. Maybe it's the student doesn't feel like they can be successful, and so projecting I don't care is protection. Maybe the student is hungry, tired, mom's new creepy boyfriend is worrying them all the time. You don't know. And so being able to go, this isn't about me. How can I make give the student the confidence that they can be successful, and then give them the space. And tomorrow is a day when they might feel that. Maybe it's not today. And so, I think, getting beyond ourselves is a huge part of teaching. And it takes many, many, many years. I am learning I am a lot more chill now than I was early in my career, because my kids are dealing with stuff that is more important than whether or not they can use a semicolon correctly. It's not about me,
right? Yeah, but that patience you're describing is currency. So anything else in life, probably earlier on in your career, you don't have as much of that currency,
you're right.
Or you spend it very quickly, right?
Yeah, and out of fear, right? Oh no, if this kid acts out, they're all going to see it, and I'm going to lose control, right? And so you're terrified as a young teacher, and later you're like, if this kid acts out, maybe they need to. It's okay. We'll move on.
Yeah, we can keep going. we can keep going.
Yep. And then I can have
Cool.
a private talk with them and go, it seems like you were having a rough day. I care about you, and I'm a little worried. I've had guys who are, these like giant, burst into tears because they're like, I never hear an adult man say they care about it.
Oh, dude.
Like that's it. Sometimes
wonderful.
It's huge.
That's great. I'm so happy that you create that space where people can be comfortable. That's amazing.
That is the part that I enjoy the most. The grading, not so much.
That's why you got to get those TAs, man. Just make the TAs do
I
it.
need to figure out a way to be better about that. More efficient at delegating.
Right.
So one of the things I always, before we move on and I skip this, what is something that is going on that you want to let folks know about that's coming up?
Yeah. So I've got kind of two things going on right now. One is the workshop that we talked about at the Willamette Writers. I'm having just a lot of fun. It's road mapping your author journey, right? So basically, I have a background in tech as a project manager. And one of the ways that I started advancing my own writing career was by starting to apply some pretty basic concepts in the world of project management to my artist career, which seems like a funny way of selling out at first, but then you start to see results and you think, really
practical.
Maybe it's actually very practical. And maybe as artists, we sort of put this sort of method of thinking at arm's length because it doesn't feel like the true artist's struggle, right? But if you can get over that and apply some of these techniques, you can really start to see your goals start inching forward. So I'm loving that. It went really well at the Willamette Writers Conference. I'm doing it again for the Vancouver chapter later this month. And then I'm doing it again for the Horror Writers Association, an online class that they've got going on. So really just having a lot of fun with that at the moment.
Is the Vancouver one going to be a hybrid as well? I know that a lot of
it will be hybrid. Yeah, it will be hybrid.
No matter where you are, check that out. It will be worth your time. And that's a great, way for somebody who's, Willamette Writers is very inexpensive. Like you're getting a total steal of a deal to go, okay, I'm going to go to this Willamette Writers meeting for $10 and get this really cool course. So yeah, I encourage folks. I'll post a link to that too. But that's great. And like I said, people afterwards were saying this was really meaningful to me. Like they came out of there excited about what they were going to do in terms of planning their next steps. Because I think often we don't, I tend to be obsessed with starting with why am I doing this? And I was talking to my fiance about some people start doing something and they don't think through, okay, but why? Is this really the next, should this be the next step? And so starting from a deep place of, does this actually make sense? Or am I just going through the motions is so important.
You're spot on. And that's my favorite part of the workshop is I actually open up with challenging people on why they're writing in the first place, which can be very uncomfortable for people. Yeah. And it's a squishy thing to try and answer what our why is. And we like to say things like, I'm here to write, or I want to be a New York Times bestseller. But when you really start diving into that, you say, well, why do you want to be a New York Times bestseller? What does that actually do for you? And I love that one as my example because everybody starts as a writer thinking they're going to be the next New York Times bestseller sensation. It's just, it's a barrier you have to pass through. It's part of the, it's part of the gauntlet. Once you're through it, it's like, welcome to the club. And listen, there's still a few people who come out the gate as sensations, and that's fine. I'm not one of them. A lot of the people that I talk to are not one of them. So in the meanwhile, once you can get over that and start asking yourself really that deep question of what motivates you, what are your inner motivations, you can pivot some of your goals. And when you pivot those goals, that's when you start seeing that incremental progress, right? That's when you start getting that dopamine of checking things off your list. That's when you start accomplishing your goals. So I love what you're saying about that why. And it's a really important thing to ask. And it's funny because I've done this workshop and there's people in there who have been writing for decades. It's the first time they've asked themselves, why do I write? Why am I here? And it's a liberating and terrifying space to operate. And I love pushing people there.
Feel free to steal this if this is a useful metaphor for, I'm a big NBA fan, and the number of people who are, players in the NBA is roughly 1 to 1 million of people in the United States. And so if you are saying to yourself, I'm going to go out and shoot hoops because I want to be in the NBA, it's a 1 in a million shot. And what these players often find is they like basketball. They enjoy, there's something about the game they enjoy, whether that's they like the attention, they like the actual play of it itself, they like feeling, they like the way they physically feel when they are playing, whatever. And then kind of society says all of this drives to one goal. You should try and get to be playing at this elite level. And some of them find out when they're in the NBA, they're not happy. It doesn't necessarily make them happy because that wasn't something they picked. It was the way it goes. And some of them are much happier after they retire and they are leading summer camps with kids or whatever. That's what they love. They love some element of the game other than it must go to, you must be a New York Times bestselling author. You might find yourself a New York Times bestselling author who is miserable. If you've not thought about why you want to get there, not letting somebody else determine this is what success looks like for you.
Yeah. And it's also making that distinction between, what is an inner why and what is a goal? And those are two very different things. And being a New York Times bestseller is a goal, and arguably a not very good one. So I love popping that bubble.
Well, and the reason I use that analogy when we're talking about New York Times bestseller is the numbers are worse for writers. There are fewer than 330 whatever New York Times bestsellers a year. So your chance to become a New York Times bestseller is worse than your chance to get into the NBA. And let me tell you, if anybody's ever seen me play basketball, NBA is not happening. And so having to, then get to the place where I go, New York Times bestseller is not my goal. That's not this thing that I am striving for. I want to get to a place where I can write all the time. That would be a wonderful goal. That's and even that, you're right, it's a goal. It's not the why. Like the why is really, I wrote a mission statement for the company this last year, and that was a good practice. Why do we do this?
Yeah. And you've got this quality about you where, you're a teacher, you're writing books on craft, you're working with students, you're creating this podcast that is uplifting a community and helping audiences get to know authors on a little bit of a level. So if I had to speculate on what your why is, there's a heavy dose of mentorship that seems to course through you, right? That is what I'm talking about. That starts to get at the thing that drives you. And writing and teaching, these are vehicles,
right?
That help
that
you
was something
scratch.
I learned late in my life. Like it was as I got to the point where I was doing too many things. I ran for vice president of my state union. It was just too much. I was trying to I was overwhelmed. I was trying to do all these things, and I was thinking, what do these things have in common? And I was thinking about the elements of all of them, because any job you have, every job you've had, there's parts of it you enjoy and there are parts that you hate, right? That's normal.
Totally.
I do not like grading papers. I have colleagues who love creating curriculum. That is their favorite part. For me, it's standing up in front of students and those aha moments, right? I love the students, some teachers run great groups. I do a lot more direct instruction, which is probably not the best teaching, but I'm good at that and I enjoy that. And what I found was when I looked at all the various things that I enjoy doing, there was that through line of I enjoy that moment when I'm helping, when I'm inspiring people, when people are feeling like, oh, I can do more than I thought I could do. And whether that's, hey, read this novel that I wrote that's, this 400-page tome, and at the end of it, you feel inspired, or it is this class that I teach and you feel inspired. The through line is the inspiring, not the becoming a New York Times bestseller. And everybody goes, yay, good for you. You became a New York Times bestseller, but your work wasn't inspiring to anyone. That would not make me happy.
Well, I'll tell you what, man, you're kicking butt at it. So keep it up.
Well, we'll see. Still trying. Lots of things in the works, but also learning to, once you find that why, okay, how can I pare down the things that don't move in that direction?
Yes.
That's hard for me.
That's another big part of the workshop. I love that. Your spot. That's totally correct.
So yeah, folks, check that out. That will be really valuable. And what's the horror organization that you'll be doing the second one?
Yeah, the Horror Writers Association. So, National Association, if you're a horror writer, you can join at different tiers depending on your publication sort of portfolio. They have different chapters. We just opened the Oregon chapter. So, we've got local meetups for anybody who might be watching is interesting. You can check that out. And actually, that leads me quickly to the second thing that I'm very excited about, the Cozy Cosmic. That's a new horror anthology that's coming out by Underland Press. Edited by some wonderful humans. And this thing is such a heavy hitter. The table of contents on this is so good. And I was fortunate enough to get my piece in there. And that is coming out on October 10th. Okay. And it's the whole premise is just, cosmic horror, but make it cozy, right? You want that sense of
that, and I see these and I'm like, ooh, I would love to submit to everything for that. I was like, I'm gonna have to wait and read it because I don't know that I know cosmic cozy well enough to, it's Cthulhu in the kitchen, and that's what got me excited. I will love that.
Yeah, it's gonna be so good. Like I said, the table of contents on this is amazing. So yeah, looking forward to that.
You're right. The people who are in there, you are in very good company too. Those are some really fun. I know them as people, outside of their work as well, and they're really fun people. But they know how to write, so that will be a fun one.
Absolutely.
So I try to always post a weekly poll. I've been remiss over the last few weeks. So if this never appears anywhere, it's still a good way for folks to get to know you. So if you were polling people, what would be a question you'd want us to run as like a Twitter, Facebook poll? What's a question? The masses.
So I ran this past my wife, and because I just am spooky by nature. I love horror. I love horror movies. We went to cryptids. Okay, so what's your favorite cryptid? And then we boiled it down. If you had to choose Chupacabra or Loch Ness, which way you go in there?
That's so that would be my, because it's a good Rorschach. It says a lot about you, which is I think the one. So. Yes, that'll be a good one.
I'm not sure what it says about you yet.
Right. There needs to be a follow up. Maybe folks should weigh in with why. What does this say about me?
Yeah. What if you're Team Nessie? Why? And I think we'll start to see a pattern emerge there.
Yes, absolutely. I wonder if that will track with some of the other questions we've asked in an interesting way too. So okay, good. Sure. I'll definitely. I will try and remember to toss that one up this week.
Cool.
So what's in your to read pile? What are you looking forward to checking out coming up soon?
I've got a great little to read pile that I'm setting up here in heading into autumn. But at the top is The Trees Grew Here Because I Bled There. Is that, I want to make sure that's
The Trees Grew Because I Bled There. I've heard about this one.
The Trees Grew Because I Bled There. That is Eric LaRocca or LaRocca. I'm not sure, so I'll say both pronunciations. But Eric is a shooting star in the horror community right now. If you follow any people on Bookstagrammers or Twitters, Eric is showing up everywhere. So this is the book that I picked up at Powell's, and I can't wait to dive into it because Eric is he's crushing it.
So that's very great. Excited. I will certainly post to that and check it out myself. And what a great title.
I mean, come
because
on.
I bled there. Yep, sold. Every once in a while, you'll come across a book and you're like, "Yep, that title that did all the work for me. I'm in."
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. Okay, yeah, I'll definitely put that in there. And where can folks find you online?
Yeah, so JB Kish, Kish, so jbkish.com. That's got all my information right there. Instagram is mostly where I'm hanging out these days, and I'm starting a Substack. I'm putting some of this thinking I've been doing around project management in the artist space. I'm going to start publishing some thoughts there on Substack that people can start finding this outside of my workshops. And I'm trying to make that a little bit more generic to the world of art. So you don't necessarily have to be a writer, I think, to be applying some of these concepts. In fact, I don't even think, this is general application for life stuff.
Project career management for creators. And that's that's going to hit just about everybody. But I think that's a good model. I'll check that out myself.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I'm interested in Substack as a platform and seeing how that develops too. So we've thought about doing like a monthly short story Substack because we've got all
Yeah.
the writers that we work with. Instead of saying, okay, we're going to put out an annual anthology, could we just do a Substack that's like a monthly
Yeah.
short story? So yeah, that's
So
did you hear how that
one
goes?
thing on Substack that I'll rep real quick is that they are winning some big accessibility points at the moment, because there's a new feature where you can record your post. They have an audio sort of functionality, so you can record your post. So folks who get it in their email or check it out on the app or the website can click play and listen to you read it if that is something that is easier for them. I'm a huge audiobook nerd, so I would love that. And a lot of the people I'm seeing on the site aren't using it enough yet. So that's a call to action for the folk that are using it, and an invitation for people who've been sort of Substack curious. And
well, and I'm thinking there are 4 or 5 that I subscribe to, and so and often I'll go, oh, I love this person's work, but I'm not sure I've got time right now. I've got to go do this thing. Well, being able to go play, okay, I'm keeping up, so that'll be handy when doing 10,000 things. But I also love it from the accessibility angle. Folks who need that, that's wonderful. This is a new thing. I'm now asking all these wonderful writers I get to have on this show, who are their recommendations for other writers that I should have on? So who's somebody that you think of that you think that would be a good guest?
Yeah, totally. And there's so many wonderful people. Summer Olson comes to mind. She's repped by the Lark Group right now. She's an author. She writes femme forward historical thrillers. And she and I have been exchanging work for years now in a writer's group, and the work that she puts out gets under your skin. It's historical fiction, and she adds these elements of, thriller genre that make you second guess what you're reading the entire time. And it's one of those great rides where you're speeding to get to the end of her work because you just want to know what the hell's hiding behind the curtain.
What is this
very
not telling us?
Very satisfying. So I think she would be a great person to have a conversation with.
Good call. I will definitely reach out. So before we get to our send-off, I've got some folks I need to thank. Thanks to Max Oakland, who reached out and provided one of his songs for our intro song, I Prefer the Dusk. Let Max know you like it by following him on Twitter at Max Oakland with 3 Ds. Thanks to Halizna CCO for their song Kids for the ad break. If you're in a band and you'd like your song used on the show, I'd love to highlight a listener's work like Max's song, so email that to me. Thanks to Doug, the producer, for making this show sound good and taking the blame when it doesn't. Thank you always, Doug. And I cannot forget to mention, Writers Not Writing is a production of Lu-Pai Publishing. So please go to lu-paipublishing.com. Check out the amazing books written by writers who didn't procrastinate too much. If you like this show, rate and review it wherever you found it. Please check out JB's author road mapping workshop. Those 2 workshops that are coming up. And when that Cozy Cosmic comes out, grab a copy of that. And then even a very short review and a single click on that 5th star makes a huge difference. So when that Cozy Cosmic comes out, give that 5th star. And if you have 3 minutes, make JB's day. I mean, it does not take long to write a review. I'm too old to say smash that like button for this show, but if you like it, gently tap on the like button an odd number of times. That would be really appreciated. So what would be one thing, JB, that you would want our listeners to take away as they go into their week?
Yeah, so to misquote a famous song, it is cool to be kind.
Yes, always wise to remember. Second, I would say a book without spaces would be gibberish, and our lives need spaces too. So don't ignore the spaces. And third, no matter how much you procrastinate, we're still proud of you.
If I take my time